everyone. So I first want to start off a little bit about when I sort of took over at the museum a few years ago, and a little bit of background on the Columbus Museum of Art and why I felt that participation in crowdsourcing would be an important part of our digital strategy. So a little bit about the museum. We're definitely part of museums that are sort of embracing the new role of the museum as a participatory place and a place for community. And there's a lot of things that the museum is doing on site that were terrific as far as engaging people. This is one example. We have puzzles in the gallery that are based off of our works of art. And honestly, people spend about 45 minutes doing this on average. So things like that are going on. If you've had a chance to visit the Dallas Museum of Art and see their Center for Creative Connections, we have a very similar thing at our museum called the Center for Creativity. And people can do things like build a Calder mobile or build a tree house. Right now we have a magical forest theme in our Wonder Room, which is sort of similar to that area. So when I took over, I wanted to see what we could do sort of on the digital side. It was very flat. There was nothing sort of on the digital side that we were doing any way of really getting people to participate. So one of the things that I loved as inspiration when I took over was this wonderful project by Miranda July called Learning to Love You More. It's actually now part of SF MoMA's permanent collection. But what it was something she did around the early 2000s, where she gave people assignments, like creative assignments. There were 63 different creative assignments, and this is one example of, make an encouraging banner, and then you had to submit it via this website that she had. So I thought, well, that's sort of fit into the philosophy of our museum, doing something like that was something maybe built around the collection or exhibitions. And I wasn't really sure at the time, what platform that was going to be, what form that was going to take, how could we accomplish that? But that was part of my goal when I took over. So we tried some things in the very beginning, experimented around and weren't having a lot of success. We tried an experiment on Flickr. We had, it was the bicentennial for Columbus, the city of Columbus, a couple of years ago, and so we wanted to do something where we were like, well, show us your view of Columbus. Go out and take pictures and, post it to Flickr, and then, we'll share it, and it totally fell flat. We maybe had like 80 people that participated, and I think a good part of the reason was that it was not the right platform at the right time. Flickr is not a very social platform. It's not a very viral platform. So completely fell flat. There was another project we did on Flickr that was a little bit more successful, but still not really correct. So then we had, whoops, is that my right slide? Yes, okay. Then in 2012, we had an exhibit called Radical Camera. And it was a exhibit based around the Photo League, which was a group of photographers from the 30s and 40s. And some of them were well known, many of them weren't. And one of the things that they did is they had something called photo hunts. And they went out on a Saturday and they gave people a photo challenge. And they said, go out and take a picture of this word or this phrase, come back, we'll develop it. We'll have a party, we'll have a mini pop-up exhibition. So I thought, well, let's see what we could do with that. Let's try that and do something similar, but modernize it. So that's what we did, and it even worked into the galleries. You'll see things over here to the side, you'll see the little tags. We took those phrases and we basically gave people challenges based on some of the photos. So this is an example, this is one of the photos from the exhibition. And we gave them a challenge and we said, okay, go out and take a picture of what your version of what you think curiosity is. And so then what they did is they tagged their photos to Instagram or Flickr or Twitter. That's what we started out with. We wound up getting immediate participation, immediate success, and we did the same thing. We gave them over the course of the summer, we did all of this, and then we had an actual exhibition that we had up for a couple of months, and we did a big party and reception for everybody and got everybody together. And that part of it proved to be really critical because you took basically what was just a digital thing and you brought everybody together into this community. And so we've built on that ever since. The other thing I will say about this is that it's cross-departmental. This is not something that's just done out of digital on my side. This is something where we enlisted the curators, we enlisted people from our education department who do on-site engagement, and we enlisted our exhibition team to design something interesting. So I think that was a very important part about this too. We kind of slowly expand from there. And since we've been doing this, we've actually now done 5 exhibitions that were inspired by something either from our collections or another exhibition. This one right here was based off of actually Matthew Brandt. We had a really fantastic contemporary photography exhibition, and it was his first solo museum show. So we gave people challenges based on things that he did. So this was, for instance, Distressed. And this is what it actually looks like. And each time we kind of also improved the look of the actual exhibition in our community gallery, and even improved things like the labeling, and we kind of kept working on all of those things along the way. So we've learned kind of a lot of things along the way. First of all, mobile photographers really do take a lot of photos. And when I say a lot of photos, I do mean a lot of photos. And the other thing is that when you're thinking about trying to develop audience, the wonderful thing about something like mobile photography and doing something like a crowdsourced project through mobile photography is that people come from a whole wide variety of backgrounds. So you'll see in this picture, the woman, especially over here to the left, she's a 90-year-old woman who came. We were the site for Instagram's Worldwide Instameet a couple of months ago. And basically the photographers there completely embraced her and made her feel part of this community. So it's a wonderful platform for doing something crowdsourced. The other thing that's really interesting that we found out sort of along the way is that a lot of mobile photographers are doing this as a family. So for instance, this is a father and daughter. His daughter basically got him involved in mobile photography. He's a chief financial officer for a construction company in Columbus. She's a designer, and this is something that they do together. So this really fits also into our mission as part of the museum, because one of our missions is actually inspiring people's creativity. And so it's mission specific, it fits, like it's bringing nice attention to our collection and our exhibitions, and we've been really building community since we've been doing this. I also want to talk a little bit about things along the way, like not to do, for instance. Some of the things we've learned, of course, test your hashtags. This was a problem that we had, and we had to quickly come up with another hashtag because it was something I think we had, I can't remember if it was wet or if it was soaked. One or the other. One of them was like, Instagram did not like that hashtag. So we had to switch it around really quickly. Banned for porn, basically. The other thing is audience and privacy. This is not something that we found that necessarily works on every single project. This was something that worked for the specific mobile photography project, but when we tried to do something with a Jewish marriage contract exhibition that we had, and we said, upload your photos of this, and we had an online gallery that's part of our blog. Total fail for a lot of reasons. I think it was much too narrow an audience, and I also think that you're talking a lot about that's an audience that basically is a much more private audience, so they have their things set to private instead of public on their Instagram handles. So the other thing I think, as far as, I think you can get, when you're doing a sort of a crowdsourced project, you can get really complicated, and I think that that's the wrong way to go. This is an example of something that actually the Country Music Association did. They had an app that they had for a country music festival that they did. And they had people go out and they used our actual same hashtag. And it was interesting because they were doing it about the same time that we were doing another one of our crowdsourced hashtag projects. And they had maybe 15 people who had submitted something, and you had to take like 9 different photos like that and upload it through the app, and they made it really, just the whole thing was just really, really complicated. Well, that same time period for that last exhibition that we had 2,000 submissions. So we just kept it very simple and very easy. So, what happens when you go big? Now we're at the point where just this last month, in October, we have launched our biggest mobile photography initiative yet, and it's called Mobile Photo Now. And we partnered with a really large Instagram community of photographers. and did the same thing. We went back to our Photo League collection, and we pulled like 4 photos from that to give people inspiration, and then we gave them photo challenges, just like this Instagram community does as well. And we did it over the month of October, and we're taking all of that, we're working with the curators, we're selecting, and we're going to put it together and put it into a really large mobile photography exhibition that we'll have in February. And so the results from this, we had 45,000 submissions from 5,000 photographers from 89 countries and 6 continents. And I think that, we knew it was going to be successful, but we did not know it was going to be that successful. So what happens when something is even more successful than you even imagined? So it's really exciting because we're also going to do the same kind of thing, and we're going to have a big reception for everybody and bring everybody to Columbus. And we already know that people have said, I'm flying in from Chicago, I'm flying in from New York. So it'll be really exciting to see how that happens and how that evolves. And I just think the other thing is that, as this has grown, people have connected with each other all over the world, and we have been a catalyst for that. And so it's been wonderful because not only has it done that, it's also built our local community, and each time we've had one of these, the local community we've had seen more and more participation. So it's been particularly terrific for that. And I'll just end with a quote. This is actually from somebody who sort of participated from the beginning, and she was new to Columbus. And it's another person who actually participates with her daughter. And she said, the photo hunts will forever have a special place in my heart because they have helped me connect with people and begin to grow my roots in my new hometown. So I think, you really can't ask for anything better than that. And it's been, highlighted our collection, and we've built this really wonderful creative community. And it's been something that's really part of our mission. As far as inspiring people's creativity as well. So I will now leave it over to Gonzague, who actually, I'll just say, we actually met because of the mobile photography project. And one of the people who participated early on was an art student in Paris. And when I was taking a trip to Paris, I sent her a message, and I'm like, hey, do you think you would be available to have coffee? And then that spiraled into, hey, well, you're here. And so we went to the Pompidou, and I met Gonzague, and they happened to be having a museum gnome, right? Yeah, museum gnome, which is, sort of a professional group for museum professionals. And they happened to be having a meeting that night. So you can even do it professionally. That's what happens.
Thank you. I tried to speak faster. So I'm Gonzague Gauthier. I'm from Centre Pompidou, and I'll talk to you about 2 projects. Okay. It's good. So, maybe you know Centre Pompidou as a museum. It's also a library, a cinema, living theater. It's built in 1977, and nowadays it's go to create other places in other countries. The first places it's in France, Centre Pompidou Metz, and next year in Malaga with Centre Pompidou Provisoire. And more and more loans of work of art through the world. So that's Centre Pompidou is also other thing because we have to create a website to have another place in other country, like I said, but another place in the web to create some other experience with our public. This website is not only a social approach. It's based. The first aim is based on the data, because we create a website to push all work content produced for the public and since 1977 on the web. So it's based on the search engine, and you see the box on the right, on the left, sorry, and it's very difficult to have engagement with this form of website because it's difficult to push people to try to search something on the website. It's a very difficult approach, but we have 3 spaces on the website: the data center, the institutional area, and the personal area. The personal area is one of a bigger project, a bigger ecosystem, a social ecosystem, a social approach. This part of the website is dedicated to the link between public and content, because on the website we have all the content, like I said, so it's important to have a specific area where the public can do something with your content. It's not possible for the moment to mix the content and to use the picture, for example, to do something other than the work of art, but you can create some past in the content. You can create some historical, and you can keep some content to share with to share with people. Sorry. And the other important area is not on the website, is outside the website, is the social network and social medias. This area is dedicated to the link between the institution and the public. It's important to have two different areas with two different goals, because we manage to the content in one and to the institution with the other, not the brand. It's important to say it's not a brand area, it's really to have a conversation, to have an exchange with the public. So the principal social networks are Facebook and Twitter, because we have a lot of issues with the rights with our work of art. It's impossible in France to publish work of art without permission, or you have to pay. So it's very difficult to share a picture of our work of arts in the social media. So it's pretty impossible to be on Instagram or something like that. What is an audience? What is a public? For us, is the main thing with the public is to share. We can create an audience or a public if the public is about to share something, to share a feeling, to share content, to create something and to share this. It's very important. So I just say it's not possible to share something, so there is an issue for us to create a public, to create a really community without sharing something. Just one thing before I'll talk to you about our project. It's a thing about the context in France. The cultural policy in France is an heritage of from the Enlightenment. So the museum is a school. It's not true in any case, of course, but the main idea is a school in the museum to educate people to be a good citizen. So the main of the project is to upgrade people, to do something. It's very important in the cultural policy in France. Keep it in mind, and it's very important for the next. So the first project is a paper toy. A paper toy is it's a toy in paper. You can customize it. You have just the paper in blank, and you can customize like this artist, Isabelle Quesset-Jean. And in the second time for the paper toy project, we asked two people to create a story with Roy Lichtenstein work of arts. So why is the crying girl crying? There is an example. And is another example. So is it just a joke? Because obviously it's really funny. So it's a Mondrian, and it's impossible to be in love with Liechtenstein when you are a Mondrian. I don't know, but it's not just a joke, obviously, because the aim of the project is to understand what Roy Lichtenstein do. Roy Lichtenstein used other work of arts. Roy Lichtenstein used storytelling in his work of arts. So we try to make people thinking about that, experiment the same thing that Roy Lichtenstein experimented when he creates his work of arts. So it's very important because in Centre Pompidou in 1977, the first goal is to make people practice, to make young people practice. So it's totally linked with the history of the Centre Pompidou to have kind of workshops on our social approach. So it's a game. We have rights issues, like I said, and we want to working with a creative community, so we have to choose the right platform, like you said a few minutes ago. So we choose a Tumblr, and we choose to work on the Roy Lichtenstein work of arts because it was linked with our project, like I said. And it's really great because this kind of project lets us create a new point of view. There is not just the discourse of the institution. The discourse of the institution is in gallery, and the discourse of the public is in the website. Is in the website, is in the social area, and other things like that. So it's very important to create a link with these different discourses. The second project is collaborative indexing. Central Pompidou website is based on the semantics, so there is two things very important: the keywords and the data, and the links. So how can we create links, and how can we create more and more data on your website? It's very difficult to do this kind of crowdsourcing project because the answer is data are from the museum, data are from the library, data is from specialists, so data aren't from the public. It's very difficult to make this kind of project in a museum, but we create this kind of interface directly in the website. You can click on the button, and you have the box to propose your keyword. This idea, it's very simple. It's not a new thing. It's not another interface. It's on our website, and it's the main point because it's very important. We have just one website. We have just one interface to our data. So it's important to understand that this one interface is dedicated also to the keyword of the public. It's really a huge challenge for an institution to share the only interface with its public. So it creates, like I said, a polyphonic place, a place where the discourses can exchange with each other. Collaborative indexing has a long story in Central Pompidou because we began in 4 years ago with a Wikimedia workshop. With Wikimedia workshop in the museum directly, and after we do other Wikimedia workshops in the website in Wikimedia. So it's a long story, but we have to try something, we have to try other things to have data on the website, not just on the Wikimedia, on the Wikipedia. And it's necessary to have different form, different kind of workshops to improve skills on your publics. So, the end, yes. 3 kinds of collaborative projects. Based on the audience uses is very important, like photography, for example. Based on skills on the public. For example, you can ask to the public to say what is a place on the picture or something like that. The public can recognize his own place, for example, and based on the uses too, but in another way. Not focus on what the cultural institution wants, but on the public, on what the public wants. It's very important for me. It's a more important kind of project because it's a way to change the institution itself. It's not necessary to keep our institution safe from the outside world. It's important to change the content and to make people use the content to on life. Many thanks.
We have about 2 minutes for questions, if you have any questions for the last speakers. Yes, Robin.
Yeah, I just have a question for Caroline. No, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I missed the very beginning of your talk. I just was curious to know how big of a presence you had on Instagram before you started these CMA photo hunts.
Oh, 9. We had 9 people following us. Yes. Yeah. At the end of the very first one, we had close to I think we had 900. We went from 9 to 900 in a couple of months.
That was asked
and
how long it
it's
took.
actually been a major part of our growth on Instagram. And with this last one, I think we gained more than 1,000 followers that we gained just for the last one in October with the last challenges.
I have a question for you also. How you said you had many, many photos, because I know photographers do take a lot of photos. How did you assess what you would be selecting?
That we left to the curators. So each person, and that's what I said about, kind of bringing in multi-departmental, making it a multi-departmental collaboration. The curators are the ones who have the best eyes, so we deferred to the curators. And we've had several different curators been involved in the project since it started.
And at the end, finish at
At the end, it depends on the space that we have. Typically, it had been like about 50 to 60 photos that would be displayed. This time, we're not exactly sure what that number will be, but it will be large. So from the last one before this big one, we went from like 2,000 photos, and then we wound up selecting about 50 to 60 photos that were displayed.
You said you started out with like 9 followers on Instagram. When did you decide that you guys as an institution was ready to go on to the next step, to be that bigger?
We had seen that it was very, very successful, and we wanted to see, well, what do we do if we did this on even a bigger front? And so I think we certainly, after doing 5 exhibitions, we felt pretty confident that, we knew what we were doing by that point in time, and we were ready to go to that next big step. So the other thing is it's also like we're going to have a much bigger national platform. We're opening up a new wing that will open up in the fall of 2015. So I think this also sort of fits nicely into that as well.
Any other questions?
How will you support the international coming in?
How will we support the international community coming in? Yeah, well, there a lot. I think we'll see who actually comes for the reception. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see how that all shakes out.
Thank you. Okay, on to our next speaker, and I should mention quickly, because I forgot to mention at the beginning, that my name is Vicki Portway, and I'm on the MCN Board of Directors. So if you have any questions about MCN or any feedback about the conference, please do let me know. Next on our agenda is Dominic McDevitt-Parks, who is in the U.S. National Archives Office of Innovation on its Wikipedia and open data programs with the goal of increasing public access to archival holdings. A longtime Wikipedian, Dominic has been an active editor of the site since 2004 and an administrator since 2005. He is also an advisor for the DC chapter of Wikimedia. Today he'll be sharing how your cultural organization can collaborate with Wikipedians by organizing an editathon, which I'm really excited about because I want to do one of these. So.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. Can everybody hear me? As Vicki said, I've been around Wikipedia for a long time. If anybody has any questions about any aspect of Wikipedia, you can feel free to ask me afterwards. But when I was thinking about what I wanted to propose for a session, I knew that Wikipedia is can seem unapproachable and arcane to a lot of people. So I really wanted to think about something that's very practical for people. So this is actually not really even going to be a case study, but more of a how-to. I think that it's really kind of in the spirit of thinking big, because Wikipedia is such a visible platform, but starting small, because an editathon, I think, is really the best way to start off with Wikipedia, and any museum really should be able to do it. Also I should mention, if you're tweeting, you can use the GlamWiki hashtag. Also, if you don't know what GlamWiki is, I will get into that. So just to give you a short history, Wikipedia has been around since 2001, and Wikipedians have been meeting in the real world since shortly after that. But it wasn't until about 5 years ago that this concept of GLAM Wiki arose. And GLAM stands for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. So GLAM Wiki is kind of the movement to bring together Wikipedia and the resources of cultural institutions. If you're interested in that, you can go to us.glamwiki.org, which is the portal for the GLAM Wiki Consortium in the US. So really, in terms of editathons, how this kind of came about was, generally speaking, an editathon is basically any Wikipedians getting together in a room and editing together, right? But we have kind of a more specific spin on that in the cultural sector. And it kind of started off with this idea of the backstage pass. And it's the idea that the cultural institution, in order to engage Wikipedians, would actually invite them into the building, which most Wikipedians, especially when it comes to institutions of learning and cultural institutions, we're not used to being treated that way. The backstage pass is kind of what we used to call what are now just editathons because it's so normal. So these are pictures from the first ever backstage pass and editathon, which was at the British Museum in 2010. And then our first backstage pass and editathon at the National Archives in 2012. So you can see part of the idea here was it's not just Wikipedians getting together in a room and editing, but it's also the cultural institution getting involved and showing Wikipedians behind the scenes, but also that because of that, it's about involving kind of the resources of the institution and the subject matter experts. So there is a big kind of aspect of in order to bring the Wikipedians in, you're offering them something that not everybody gets, because they're going to be sort of volunteering for the institution. So what really is it for the cultural institution editathon? It's a public outreach event on site based around editing Wikipedia articles, and it's also about engaging not just the local Wikipedia community, but new editors who have never edited Wikipedia before, and also staff who can be building Wikipedia skills. So another way to think about what it is this is what it looks like. So kind of try to keep that in mind. This is an editathon that was at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So it really is people sitting around a table editing. But that's 30 people working on Wikipedia articles can have a big impact. So in terms of the especially the things that are specific to what you might want to do in a cultural institution setting, generally you have a theme, whether it's about an exhibition or collections or something like that. You'll want to offer a Wikipedia tutorial for people who are new editors in the room. You'll want to, as I was saying, offer something from the museum's kind of subject matter expertise. Usually there's a tour, presentation from a curator, that sort of thing. And that kind of will tie into the theme of the event. And a lot of times lunch. And that can be, I think, actually really important. Especially one of the differences, and I'll kind of lay out what like a sample editathon might look like in terms of the agenda and everything. A lot of times these are full-day events, and the reason for that is that you want to have enough time to introduce a topic, introduce Wikipedia, and then have a few hours to actually get editing in, so that people can accomplish something. So that's why it turns out that something like lunch can be important. And that's not to say that there is only one way to do an editathon, because you can also maybe compact it into, say, an hour or 2 hours, but it's going to be a very different type of edit-a-thon. Maybe it'll be the people in the audience making their first edit, but they're not going to be writing a whole article typically in that time frame. So I guess I should start first, though, by saying why. At the National Archives, this is our why. Wikipedia is very important. I guess I'm not actually in full screen, am I? This is one way that we think about it. As an archives, our overall mission is providing access to our holdings. Over 75% of digital access to National Archives holdings is via Wikipedia. And what I mean by that is if we count the aggregate numbers of page views of Wikipedia articles that use National Archives records as images, it's over 1 billion. Our website, if you're looking at other third-party or all platforms, our website isn't even number 2 to Wikipedia. It's our corporate partners like Ancestry. So we're really thinking about access in terms of not just click-throughs, but where it actually happens. So that's the big picture of why Wikipedia is important to us. In terms of the why the edit-a-thon, it really comes back to your mission as a cultural institution. And I listed here a few of the things that you could see as potential outcomes for an edit-a-thon. And the first and most obvious is creating or improving the educational content on Wikipedia. Because that's where most people, if they're looking for information about the things in your museum, if they're Googling it, they're going to Wikipedia first, And your mission is about getting out information about that, not driving page views on your website. And so what goes along with that is access to collections. For the National Archives, one of the main ways we engage with Wikipedia is by contributing our actual digital content, which means that by trying to stimulate the growth of Wikipedia articles in those subject areas related to our holdings, part of that is Wikipedians actually placing those the digitized content in the articles themselves, and that counts as access, even if it's not happening on our website. But there are other benefits that I think in some ways are probably more important. As cultural institutions, one of the big things that we are involved in is information literacy and digital literacy. And so there's a big benefit in talking about Wikipedia and how it works, even if the people who come to an edit-a-thon for the first time and maybe only time don't ever continue on as Wikipedia editors. They've gotten this kind of look into how knowledge is produced on the internet, kind of how they can critically evaluate digital sources, tell the difference between a good Wikipedia article and a bad Wikipedia article, and all those sorts of things. And that's especially true for the staff of the institution themselves. One of the things that we discovered at a lot of the Smithsonian edit-a-thons is that sometimes half of the attendees were actually from all the various Smithsonian units. So it turns out that the edit-a-thon is really, it's great as a public outreach event, but it's also just as great, or maybe more so, as a staff training opportunity. Because Wikipedia can be tricky, and there's no better way to learn Wikipedia than sitting side by side at the table, writing a Wikipedia article with somebody from the local Wikipedia community who came in for the event. And it's really great sometimes to watch it in action, see the buzz in the room and like people shouting across the table, like, how do I do a footnote, and somebody answering their question. And you can't get that experience online. So in a lot of ways, if you want to be a Wikipedia savvy institution, you're not going to finish writing Wikipedia on a Saturday afternoon, but you can build a lot of Wikipedia savvy within your staff and build advocates for working on Wikipedia just by kind of having the event and building the connections. I'm going to kind of get down to talking about what an actual editathon, what it is and what it takes to do. First, some basics about venue, scheduling, what types of staff resources are involved. Generally, what works best is thinking about a room that could fit 20 people or so, at least comfortably. Have a projector, have good Wi-Fi, outlets and power strips. Those are all things that can be very important. And it's not that difficult in the end. You know, we've had editathons. We had an editathon at the Historical Society of a town that was about an hour outside of DC and didn't have Wi-Fi. But you know, we brought our own hotspot and we were making it work in a historic building. So it's not necessarily that difficult, but these are all things that you need to think about before you can even think about having the event itself. Scheduling is also important, and the important thing to think here is what type of event are you going to hold? Is this going to be like the whole at least half to full day event, or can you only do an hour or two? Because those are going to be very different types of events. And another thing that we've found is very important is you'll get a completely different segment of the population depending on whether you hold the event on a weekday, in the middle of the day, or on a weekend. So to give you an example of the difference, we've found that for a lot of the Smithsonian editathons that we held, they're mostly held on a weekday, usually like on a Friday, all day. And that works fine because, you know, the Smithsonian is the Smithsonian, it's in downtown DC, people will come, and also there are so many just staff and units of the Smithsonian who generally, you know, would only go to an event like this because it's during their workday, that it's actually more conducive for having a full room to have the event on a weekday. We found at the National Archives actually the opposite. You know, it's not the kind of institutional culture where people from within the agency were coming to an editathon, by and large. So it was more geared towards the public. And so generally, most of the events we had at the National Archives were on a weekend day. Also, of course, it's important to think about planning ahead and advertising for weeks in advance. And part of that is that you're not just advertising to your own audience or your own community, but you have to, or at least if this is your first time, you have to kind of figure out your way around the Wikipedia community and how you reach that community, because there are different channels to advertise to them. The other thing to think about, what types of staff resources. In reality, a Wikipedia editathon can be run by a single person, depending on how much time they have. But generally, there are at least like 2 different roles from the institution staff that are involved. And there's the kind of event coordination role, the person who kind of usually like has the idea, wants to do the editathon. But I think it's really important if you're thinking about kind of ingraining this in the work of the institution, that you're getting subject matter experts on board. Because if the Wikipedia editathon is part of, you know, your overall, you know, exhibition strategy, or there's a certain collection, or a curator has a research area that they're interested in, then it becomes a lot more about the regular work of the institution, rather than just being, you know, 4 walls and a table that the Wikipedia community is allowed to use and you're the host. So I think that's important. It's also important to advertise to your own staff, because as I was saying, I think that's a big part of the reason you would have the editathon in the first place. So you know, as many people as you can get from across the organization, just to show up as participants, not as organizers, is also really important. So 5 just kind of quickly important aspects of how the editathon actually plays out. theme, having an event page on Wikipedia, a task list, promoting it, and the agenda. So the theme is actually pretty important because this is what's very different from other types of Wikipedia events. Here's some examples of themes from the last year for editathons that we held in DC. Civil War and American Art, Women in Science, International Year of Statistics. These are all things where if you pick a good discrete theme, it's, for one thing, you're broadcasting to the people who might want to come, here's the subject area. But you're also kind of orienting for the institution. You can set the theme based on your institutional priorities of what it is you're trying to focus on, and kind of involve have this be involved with your overall strategies. The other thing, which is probably not as obvious to outsiders, is that for the Wikipedia community, every meetup has to have an event page on Wikipedia. The Wikipedia community does not generally just organize through like Eventbrite or Meetup.com or those sorts of things. So for example, for the DC community, there's an actual page listing all of the editathons on Wikipedia, and there are templates for how you create these pages and things. So this is what an example of an editathon event page on Wikipedia looks like. This is an editathon that we held at the American Art Museum last year. So you can see there's like a very clear just kind of format to the page. So I'll get into some of the other, what the reason for this is and some of the other things on the page in a minute. Because another big part, this is the other thing that's maybe not so obvious is that I think the biggest real work of the institution leading up to an editathon is coming up with a task list and providing resources. So you have to kind of think about this. What is it that the people who are coming to the editathon can accomplish in 2, 3, 4 hours or whatever it is? Because you're not going to send them home with homework, right? They have to finish an article. The long-term editors that are coming, maybe they will take an article home with them. But you kind of have to assume if somebody has a half-finished article, then that's essentially nothing produced because they're just going to forget about it. A lot of people, they came to the event because it was an event, and maybe for like social reasons. A lot of times people's first instinct is, we're having an editathon around like the history of law. So we should work on the article, the history of law, right? But nobody's going to write, you're not going to get like 15 people in a room writing a great Wikipedia article about the history of law in 3 hours, because first they have to do like dissertation level research about that subject. So instead you need to think about, and this is where kind of the subject matter expertise of your institution comes in. The person who knows that theme in your institution, that collection or whatever it is, needs to take like a critical eye to Wikipedia and look at what are the holes in Wikipedia, or whether it's gaps in coverage or poorly developed articles and those sorts of things, and really make a list of things that are discrete, easily digestible topics. So the people who are coming into your event are not experts in that area. They're coming in just to participate. So they're going to need to like educate themselves in the actual subject and then write a short summary. And if you want to get an article in Wikipedia to stick nowadays, generally you need like at least a paragraph that says what it is, kind of asserts the notability of the subject, and has some good references. So we as the subject matter experts can do a lot of that work ahead of time by picking people, places, events, things like that would be great articles to be created and that we know from our own expertise are notable, and we can even find good secondary sources ahead of time to provide so that people can just go, arrive, do a little reading up on the things you've already provided, write the summary, and they've actually produced something. So this is an example. I know you probably can't all read this, but this is an example of a task list from an editathon where there were suggested articles here, and the institution has provided a bunch of links to secondary sources ahead of time. And the articles here that are in the articles to be created section, of course, were red links before the event, but now after the fact, when I screenshotted it, they're blue because they were created during the editathon. So just to quickly go through promotion, there's actually, in order to reach the Wikipedia community, there's a lot of different channels. If you have a good Wikipedia community in your area, there might be a chapter, if you're in New York and DC, at least in the US. There are things that you can do, like use the Wikipedians mailing list, meetup.com page, all those sorts of things. And you'll want to promote it about a month or two ahead of time. So I've already kind of alluded to this, but this is what an agenda might look like in order. A presentation from the subject matter expert about the theme, the tutorial on Wikipedia, the lunch, and then just kind of the time for free-form editing. So it's not that complicated in the end. Here's an example of an agenda from an editathon. One word of warning, though, something to keep in mind. The goal of an editathon and of engaging with Wikipedia in general from the perspective of the cultural sector is to spotlight areas of expertise of the institution to serve your mission. It's not about polishing the image. So that's just kind of a general thing to think about. If you spend your time on Wikipedia editing your own article or encouraging people to do so, then you're probably going to end up getting in trouble with Wikipedians rather than having a healthy relationship. And that's, editing articles about notable collections objects and those sorts of things. That's actually serving your mission better than editing the article about your institution. So there's all these other sorts of implications that come from that. You have to use even if you're staff, you'll use an individual account and just disclose your identity on the account rather than having like some organizational Wikipedia account doing editing with no name attached to it. All those sorts of things. The last thing I would say is, think big, start small. Also get creative. So this is kind of, at the National Archives, we took this concept of an editathon, actually editing Wikipedia, and kind of had a different spin on that and started having scanathons. The idea is that Wikipedia is a very visual platform, and Wikimedia Commons, which is the sister project, is completely devoted to multimedia, and we as an archive don't really do a lot of interpretation. So in some ways, doing something like actually inviting the Wikipedia community into the research room to scan images for their own benefit, but also for us, was a really natural fit. So there are a lot of other different kinds of approaches you can take, whether it's like a photography contest or other ways of engaging the Wikipedia community. So I think I'm almost out of time, but this is my last slide. And I would just say other things to think about, always record your results before you wrap up. That's something that we usually do, like the last 10 or 20 minutes of the event is tell everybody to write on the actual event page what it is you did, and then we have that record. Another thing is, internally, it's important to manage expectations. Like I said, you're not going to finish Wikipedia, but there are a lot of other intangible things. So sometimes people get caught up in trying to count edits or count new articles, and that might be like 4 new articles or something. So depending on what your expectations are, that might not sound like a lot, but there are all these other benefits in terms of just increasing the the information literacy of the people who came and those sorts of things. And so if you have that in mind, then beforehand, then you'll have the right level of expectations. Of course, other things. Another thing that will almost always come up with Wikipedia is copyright. So you need to be aware of sort of what the rights status is of the sorts of objects or the area of the collections that you're focusing on, and that might potentially even change what the theme of the event is. Because things in which you can easily get public domain or freely licensed content on Wikipedia for are going to be a lot easier to write about than things that you can't. But that's just one of the things that's going to be a struggle. Another two quick things are Wikimedia. The Wikimedia Foundation does have a grants program, and also in the U.S., Wikimedia DC, the chapter is probably even the better place to go, and they have a small grants program, which would allow cultural institutions to actually apply for a grant for lunch for an editathon. And that's how a lot of the editathons at the Smithsonian in the DC area are done, because it can be hard to find money for lunch for something like this. And I know at the National Archives, we're actually not allowed to use taxpayer money on lunch for public events. But yeah, find a real Wikipedian to help you, and that's usually the best way to do things like hold a tutorial. You don't need to know everything yourself ahead of time. Okay, any questions? Yes, sorry.
I think this is a great idea that you showed. This is awesome, love the concept. Cool. But I'm wondering, beyond with the editathons, have your organization given any thought to operationalizing or bringing in this type of storytelling, story writing capability within the organization? Maybe shifting resources away from just pumping things into websites like we all do, but using this, to your point, it's
right.
such a popular medium.
I mean, in some sense, that's why I kind of exist. I was the Wikipedian in residence, or I am, I should say, the Wikipedian in residence at the National Archives. But because I'm one person, the approach we've always taken is just that the National Archives is not authoring content. We're taking the crowdsourcing approach, and we're trying to enable, be facilitators for the existing Wikipedia community. And that's why we're doing things like uploading our holdings and that kind of thing. Okay. Sorry, Kova.
I would encourage you to find Dominic after, because I actually have taken his time, half hour at a time, to talk about these things, and it's a really interesting opportunity for organizations to get involved with Wikipedia. Next up, last but certainly not least, is Leonard Steinbach. Len is Principal of Cultural Technology Strategies, which provides strategic technology consultation services to a broad range of museums and cultural institutions, with 20 years in the technology sector, with senior management positions in higher education research and the arts, including Cleveland Museum of Art and Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York. He's on the advisory board of the New Media Consortium, and he's a former president of MCN. So Len is going to talk about crowdfunding.
Thank you so much. So what I'd like to know first off is, have any of you done crowdfunding? Okay. Are you here? You have. Okay. So when I'm showing examples, then I'll point to you to shout out your example. Okay. So, and we'll have some time for questions, so I'm going to go through fairly quickly. Are you considering doing crowdfunding? Okay. For those of you who are considering crowdfunding, are you hoping for encouragement, or that you can go home and say, we better not do that? Not sure yet. Okay. So I come here not as an evangelist, but to inform you what my review of this is all about. Also, I will let you know that on the chair by the door is a full resource list and bibliography in this topic. So, and those will give you a lot of information and handbooks and new publications on this field. So I want you to feel sort of comfortable at the end that you know what you might be getting into, and also that we'll deal with some big questions. I'm sorry, what do I hit here to get? Just the tab button. I'm sorry. Okay, great. That's okay, that's fine. There we go. So we're talking about maybe it's even more fun when it's crowd-funded. And what I hope to do is go through a lot of examples to show you the range of activities, both in the US and a little bit around the world, go through some of the pragmatics of it, and also ask some really big questions that I think have emerged since this has started in the cultural sector, things that I think you should be aware about. Okay, so crowdfunding, why am I missing, I'm not sure why I'm missing part of the slide there, but okay. Crowdfunding, in essence, is this pooling of funds from people who share your passion for a project in return for rewards which are mostly intrinsic. That's what makes the cultural sector and nonprofit sector so important. And perks do play a role, which we'll talk about more. And more technically, it's the raising of funds through the collection of small contributions from the general public using the internet and social media. Without the internet and social media, we would not be here dealing with this, although crowdfunding has a long history going back well over 100 years, which I will not go into now. Okay. So, why would someone give you their money? It's important to understand the motivation. And the motivation is fairly clear. It's fun, it's altruistic, it's the personal acknowledgement that you've done something, it's the dedication to a principled belief that you have, it's being part of a community of interest in whatever it is you're funding. It's rewards, it's mementos, it's all this stuff, and we'll get into more of that in a little bit. Because it is much deeper than that. It is joining someone in their creative project. It's getting a window into thoughts and processes, because good crowdfunding projects provide feedback. You get to know the people involved, the steps involved. It is also involved with something worthwhile. It's to feel the pride of giving to a good cause. And it's the development and realization of a project that is somewhat meaningful to the contributor, which is not to say that a reward doesn't help. And that's not to say that there's a great feeling about knowing that something is happening and without you, it would not have happened. It is part of our participatory culture. I'll get into more in a couple moments. Okay. So the question is, am I just an evangelist here, or do I actually play the game? So I thought I'd share with you some of the many crowdfunding sites that I'm involved in, that I've contributed to. And the wonderful thing is, if you haven't browsed, do so. It's great joy for that $10, $25, $50. So these are just a few that I'm involved with. On the top left there is a couple known as Pompidou, creating great videos. I love their music. They're out of, I believe, Portland. And there is a subscription model of funding, which we'll talk about. And what happens is, every time they create a new musical piece and a musical video, and they produce a video instructing other artists how they got their effects, how they played their music, $5 comes out of my charge account, my charge card. And I love it, because I love their music, and I think they're doing great work. The Viking of 6th Avenue, otherwise known as Moondog or Lewis Harden, one of the great composers of the 20th century, but known for many decades as the man who stood in a Viking costume on 57th Street and 7th Avenue, but was invited by, I believe it was Stokowski, to go into Carnegie Hall to participate, and ended up living with John Cage for 2 years and moved to Denmark. And he's a wonderful composer. I've loved his music for decades. And he's finally getting more and more recognition by a company that wants to do a biopic about him. And a very legitimate company. And why am I thrilled about that? What's my perk there? My perk there is, on the day that it is released internationally to theaters, I have a license to show it simultaneously at home. And I'm having one hell of a party. So that's my perk, because I've loved his music forever. The ISEE E3 reboot project, which you probably know about. You want to say what it is? Say what it is.
It's a satellite that was...
Talk to them. I know what it is.
All right. I have to talk into this.
Talk into this.
It's a satellite that it was launched in the 80s. It passed a comet, and then it went dormant, but it was still operational, and they handed it off to a group of science geeks that wanted to reactivate the satellite and retask it.
And to find out how to do that, they went to the homes of the people who worked on it years ago, and it's an educational project, and it's terrific. And for my I got to meet one of the people involved in it, and what did I get for that? I got a NASA-like cloth patch that I have to put on a jacket saying I was part of this project. And one more, I shouldn't be spending so much time on this. And this is a film called Shockwaves by a woman named Kasumi, who's a personal friend, and it is hitting the theaters soon, and it is a whole new genre of film. And I'm very excited to be supportive of that. So this is great. So when I talk about the participation and the rewards, I feel it. I'm not just telling you about it. But let's look at some great examples from museums and cultural heritage. I'm going to zoom past these, but I hope they give you the range. Okay. Smithsonian Institution raised $170,000 for their yoga exhibition. It was their first crowdsourcing campaign. Interesting thing about it, which we'll talk a little bit about later, is that part of the money, in fact, came from corporate sources as well, because they could not lose. They were not going to make this unsuccessful, and that's legitimate. But they had over 600 participants. Okay, then we have, this is probably the most famous one. Let's build a goddamn Tesla museum. A guy who runs a website who's known as Oatmeal got pissed off because his laboratory was being sold, and he raised money to buy the property on Long Island. Of course, it was not enough money to build a museum. He's got another fundraising campaign. Elon Musk of Tesla, the company, has promised to put a charging station there and is giving $1 million in match to it. It's going to happen. Love it. Okay, the Hamish Henderson Archive in Scotland. He's a famous scholar and musicologist. Important archive was passed on when he passed away. And this funded indexing of the archives. It was successful, and now the archive is at the University of Edinburgh. Here is Saints and Secrets, The Lost History of Leiston Abbey, a very important archaeological site, 14th century ruins of this abbey. It's an archaeological group, rather, is going to be excavating it. And I did not contribute to it, but if I did, I might have tried to find enough money so I could get the perk that allowed me to go on the archaeological dig. Great project. And they have they've created special software for contributing to this that they're making publicly available. Love it. Cathedral of Chartres. Crowdfunding, and crowdfunding is pretty big in France now for public projects and monuments and all sorts of things. And this was for restoration of their windows. Okay, this is one of my favorite. This is a small museum, the Lynn Museum in Lynn, Massachusetts. They created an exhibition that tells the story of survivors of the mass genocide of the killing fields of Cambodia. Material was collected from residents of Lynn, a small town with among the highest population of Cambodians in the U.S. Now talk about a small institution doing something intensely important for their community, supported by their community. These people had never gotten these artifacts together, never told their stories to, many of them I think never told their stories to their children before. Muslima, Muslim Women's and Arts and Voices. By the way, this is one of my favorite museums, period, even though it has no brick and mortar. The International Museum of Women, socially aware, collecting stories, collecting photos, and they had this exhibition online, and this funding was for an online gallery to accompany it. The Louvre is on, maybe on their fourth or fifth crowdfunding. They've financed the acquisition of national treasures. I believe they paid for the conservation of its winged victory. They've gotten statuettes, very, very big. As with our country, public funding of the arts has decreased. The Louvre's funding has gone down and down over the last few years. They're going to the public at large. Here is one, this is the Sculpture Center in New York that's doing the works of this great Thai artist. And they're collecting money. Among the art that this artist has created are videos, which are pretty old now. They're retitling them, remastering them, and showing them in an exhibition. So this is exhibition related. Here is the Phillips collection doing a Jacob Lawrence microsite. I have contributed to this one, and it is going to bring videos of conversations they've done, plus a lot of panels in high resolution onto a website. This is, for me, a little bit of retribution, because at a museum I was at that did a Jacob Lawrence exhibition about 10 years ago, I said, let's do a Jacob Lawrence website, and they said, no way, and I'm finally contributing to getting it done. And they also created this wax room at the Phillips by the artist Wolfgang Leib. And this one, this is the VMFA, and most of these have videos. We don't have time for much of that, but I had to show you this one. I had to show you this. I hope the link.
The Forbidden City, home of 2 dynasties and 24 emperors, the center of the Chinese universe for hundreds of years. This fall, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts will present almost 200 paintings, scrolls, and ceramics that illuminate the world of the emperor and those who served him. The Forbidden City was built 600 years ago by more than 1 million workers. VMFA, using 3D printers, will create a scale model in a matter of weeks. Now, for as little as $10, you can help us build the Forbidden City and help bring other exclusive world-class exhibitions to VMFA. Choose from 6 architectural features representing historic Chinese life and culture. You can play an important role in building this 21st century Forbidden City. Simply go to vmfa.museum/build-it and choose your favorite. Your gift will help VMFA build the Forbidden City.
Okay, so you get that idea. Now, I wanted to find a small museum. You cannot find a smaller, I defy you to find a much smaller museum than this one. This is the Troll Museum on the Lower East Side. This is a young woman, and if you find it, just look up Troll Museum. She succeeded in getting over $5,000. She got fired from the Tenement Museum. She talks about that. She lives down the street. So said, I can do a museum, and has a museum dedicated to the history of those little troll dolls in her apartment. In the video, she admits this is really just an excuse to let her pay her rent. Although she does entertain, she's gotten a lot of national press on her little troll museum. So I wanted to go, we went from the Louvre to the Troll Museum. I defy you to expand the scope of museums. Okay, then we have other projects. This is the Docent Educator Online. Art Basel is working with nonprofits to sponsor them. This is where you don't have to crowdfund, but you can sponsor others. I love it. The new museum is involved in the Idea City Festival, and so they are vetting a whole bunch of projects that one can fund. So these are an amazing range. I'm going to go through very rapidly some of the mechanics of it because I want to get to our big questions. Funding models fixed, or rather all or nothing. You either raise the amount you say or you get no money. That's the Kickstarter model. Flexible, keep it all. No matter what, and it's a little controversial, but keep it all means whatever you get, you get. Where that's particularly permanent is, say you're raising money to digitize a collection. That's the sort of project where, okay, you only get half the money, you get to maybe digitize half the collection. For those that don't have that sort of relationship, it's a little bit sketchy. And then there is the new subscription model for ongoing funding for general support. I described that with the music group, but I believe there are even some that are associated with museums now that fund, say, educational programs, and as long as you deliver this program every time, you get it. Okay, what are the success factors? Well, let's give it some context here. Why are we doing this? Why do we think it would work? Because the generations that are emerging as the next generations of givers that are not where the baby boomers are or the mature ones are yet, research has shown, there's a reference in my document there you can have, and you get the report online. Generation Y and X want to see the impact that their contribution is giving. Younger donors want to restrict their gift to certain purposes. They're twice as likely to give if the gift is something they know. It's cool, social, and establishes a direct link, and it's online. So, and that feeds into one of the big questions I will be asking. What are the success factors? Emotionally, intellectually compelling story, an achievable goal, not too high, not too low, sort of the Goldilocks effect. Attractively tiered giving levels, high quality promotional material, and confidence in where the seeding is coming from. Kickstarter recommends that you know where your 20% is coming from right off the bat, because nobody wants to be the first to give, except sometimes me. Okay, the right platform. There are platforms that we know like Indiegogo and stuff, Kickstarter, Razoo, Patreon, and they're the big cloud-based platforms. There are local and web-based platforms that you can put in your own site, WordPress extended platforms. My resource guide has all that information. You want to know your reach. Can somebody give in foreign currencies? There are now, I think it may be Indiegogo who's made contractual arrangements that in many countries where people don't have credit cards or bank accounts, they can wire money right in. They just go to certain cash places. What is the fee structure, the funding model? And its success is you need to know who's going to leverage your social networks to get your word out there. It is not put it up. Here was something, and maybe I'm deriving this from my personal life. I never like that to interject. So I say here, it is a lot of work, but it is about relationships. On the other hand, it is about relationships, so it is a lot of work. Okay? So now I'm going to get to the big question, so I hope we have time to discuss a little bit. And these, I think, are really serious in your considerations, and I don't see them much written about at all. So I hope it generates a conversation, and I hope these are issues that you take back with you and consider. Are crowdfunding efforts destined to remain a series of one-offs or embraced as part of an overall funding and sustainability strategy? There is a lot of work, but is the second time as much work, the third time? Are staffs, are organizations willing to say, okay, we got to get our AV staff involved in it because we have to do a good-looking video and all this sort of stuff? Is it one-off or sustainability? Museums are risk-averse, and they don't like to learn from failure like companies often do. So, I don't know. If I knew, is an enhanced set of ethics and a heightened level of transparency needed to help assure ongoing public trust. And transparency is a big issue for museums. You give progress reports, you talk about your failures, you talk about what's going on. I mean, Smithsonian didn't hide it, but are you less likely to give if you know your first giver is $70,000 from Whole Foods? Do you feel you're in the same club? Okay? What transparency level is there? What public trust? You damn well better succeed or give the money back. Okay, so, you know, and people, many people, especially young people, accept failure if you admit it and you go on to the next thing. That culture is there. Should crowdfunding be part of an overall strategy of public dialogue and engagement? Does it belong in membership development areas, or is it community involvement? How do you tie these things on together? What is the difference between the engagement that says, give me a few dollars online for something you're going to see, or the engagement that says, come to our admissions desk so you can give us money at the door? I don't know what the difference is. I think this is to be discussed and where the strategy fits in, if it becomes a strategy. Will cost and return on investment models emerge to validate whether the work needed to achieve a successful campaign is worth it? I've spoken to people involved, and they do a hell of a lot of work, and at the end, you know, they're shaking their head. Was all this worth it or not? Well, somebody should start writing down what these things cost, including the hidden costs of all the areas that need to be involved. And I think I remember reading about one institution that had this wonderful perk and found that they had to fulfill 33,000 of them. Okay, so, you know, you have to know what you're getting into. Will crowdfunding result in the cannibalization of other funding or the leveraging? So how many institutions, and there are some, that will will accept matching funds to help generate it, or will convince a major donor or members of the board to throw money in to get it going? But if that's money that they would have gotten anyway for something else, here we go. Getting back to transparency for a moment, there is an implicit sense, I believe, that when you participate in this, what the institution is saying, if you don't help us, this won't get done. That's the emotional pull. Or is it allowing the museum to make the money they no longer need for that program fungible to spend for something else? It would have happened, but now that they've got this money anyway, they can take the money out of the budget for that and put it somewhere else. This isn't always explicit, and that's part of the transparency issue. And I hate to think about any scandal sullying these opportunities. How will crowdfunding ultimately be integrated with customer relations management and membership development systems? Are those who contribute becoming the suspects, prospects, whatever, suckers, whatever level of, whatever they click when you put your membership into these systems, so that they become engaged on an ongoing basis? Is this true? This is my little formula I made up. Crowdfunding for museums equals participatory culture plus the trend of directed giving. That's the most succinct way I've come up with for explaining what this is all about. I don't know what questions I am missing. You probably do. So here's an unabashed plug, which is, this is the name of a chapter I have now in Digital Heritage and Culture Strategy and Implementation. It's just going to press this month. It's got great articles by a lot of people you've met here at MCN. There are flyers about it out at the front desk. And a lot of the work I've done was for this, and I'm very happy to share it. The bibliography and resource guide is much like what is in this book, except it's been updated in the last year, so it might be helpful. That's the unabashed gift, which is the resource list. Get it over there. See me if you want an electronic copy. Just, ask me for my card. Send me an email. I'm happy to send it. So that is thank you. I took out the slide that said, please leave $5 at the desk. Got 5 minutes for questions. Okay. I'll repeat your question.
Yeah, maybe a missing question. I work at an institution in Europe, in the Netherlands, and we don't really have a culture of attracting funds that are not coming from, say, state funding or something.
Yeah.
So we're exploring a whole range of models now that funding is cut in our country. That also includes getting sponsorships.
Right.
Donations from foundations, so stuff that is really quite common here.
So, yeah.
How would you say that crowdsourcing fits within that?
So the question is, how can crowdfunding succeed in a social and political environment where the government has been expected to spend money on the arts? And that is a great question. Is what people are getting, both in terms of satisfaction or the gifts, enough to motivate them? Do they understand the situation in the country? I mean, who would think 5 or 10 years ago, given the extensive support France has given for its patrimony, that this would be so successful there? There are a number of campaigns. Also, it's a matter of what processes exist and who the fundraising platforms are. But it is worth sort of a try. I would not try anything that was not pretty sure to be successful. There were other things on a national level. In Sweden, they're using crowdfunding to vote on what the government should be funding. So they're providing a match. So you crowdfund for this, and the government puts up choices. So there are all sorts of ways of doing it. Next question. Any other questions? Yes?
Not so much a question, but to reinforce the point.
Then come to a microphone, because You want to come up to Mike? Yeah.
I'm an avid crowdfunding backer, but I'm also a citizen scientist, and
I love it.
One of the things that we've been doing is when we find out there's a tendency for museums to be very institutional. We go to their websites, and I've learned about somebody, and I want to find them, and people are hidden. Crowdfunding is by its nature a very social, interactive, personal thing. So if you're going to do crowdfunding but have an organization that is very hide your staff, you'll probably not succeed.
Yeah.
You need to be a very, you need to be proud of your people. You need to let them have a voice. And when you crowdfund, it's all about, and I think crowdfunding is a stealth way for museums to get more engaged and interactive with,
Well, the only thing I will disagree with, I don't think it's particularly stealth. What you will find, we don't go into all the progress reports that you give. These should be given by humans. So that when you're dealing with a project, you know who's in charge, and somebody will take you to the back room and show you what they're producing and get engaged. And that's how it works. With the couple who are doing the music, I get to see them rehearse and how they perform. This is the joy. This is the connection. And that's why I asked the question about this is not fundraising. This is, to your point exactly, an elaboration of the collaborative and participatory culture that museums are now engaging in. Coven.
I wonder, actually, because this speaks to an issue certainly that I've lived in Austin for less than a week, but I know it's an issue there in the sense that there's lots of new money and venture capital in there, but most of those people are not turning into the traditional philanthropists that have supported museums, historically. Like, we're just not, the money is there, but none of it is going to cultural organizations. And I'm wondering if you see that there might be a role for these types of platforms in basically engaging those types of larger donors. I mean, we've talked more in this session about crowdfunding in the sense of like smaller donations from larger numbers of people, but is there a role to perhaps encourage those kinds of people to become more engaged?
Well, crowdfunding is not something that is unknown to many venture capitalists and investors, because recent rules of investing have allowed crowdfunding of new companies and the like. It's really opened a certain amount of capital opportunities to people who don't quite have as much money, although the rules do preclude people of less than a certain worth of participating, and I won't get into that area. The question, I think, the only guess I can take is it really relates to people who want to see what value they are getting. So whether you're talking about Bill and Melinda Gates deciding that they are going to get rid of malaria, or whatever, they're not saying we want to give money to the World Health Organization. They're saying we want to get rid of malaria. How do you engage folks on the board level of your organization? Your museum is part of a university, right? So I'm sure you have industrial types there who can be made to see the value and see the result, direct result, or the direct result of matching grants or whatever, or providing perks. So, but I think I think the potential is there. I don't know how you tap it. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thank you so very much.
Perfect timing. Thank you to all of our speakers today. I just tweeted out a thank you to MCN 2014 hashtag with all of their Twitter handles. So if you have any follow-up questions or you want to get in touch with them, please do. Thank you so much to the presenters. Thank you to the MCN sponsors. And thank you all for coming and participating. And see you tonight at the reception. Thank you.